What is the most NSFW thing you saw go down at work? I am a teacher. Our smart boards are linked to our computers, but you can freeze what's on the board so the students can do the work and you can check emails, do registers, etc. One guy thought he'd frozen the board and proceeded to sext his missus over email during a lesson. He was at least smart enough to use his personal email, but he was dumb enough to not check the board was actually frozen. Result was students photographing the rather scandalous emails and Snapchatting them to each other. I work on a different site and within 2 hours it was all over my site as well. The guy no longer works for us. I was on the toilet minding my own business while suddenly I noticed the shadow on the stall besides me moving awkwardly. Then I realized that the guy besides me was jacking off and I could see his dong as a shadow on the floor. That guy was famous for taking long trips to the bathroom. Now I know why. I had a CO worker that took massive amount of drugs on busy construction sites, to the point he would sway around and barely keep his feet. The company knew, but was so desperate for workers they turned a blind eye and never did anything about it. Shit company, couldn't keep anybody longer than a year, except this guy, had many close calls on the sites and somehow never died. One day he just drove off a site in the middle of the day. The company trucks were GPS tracked, so they found him dead in it in the shady part of town. I've worked at a country club for a long time and there's always scandalous shit going down. Housekeeper was ducking the maintenance man in the laundry room. A member walked into the bathroom and witnessed a man giving another man a BJ. The beverage cart girl was flashing her new boob job to men for tips. The latest hot off the press story was 2 CO workers were having a threesome with a member and took pics on his phone. Wife found them, sent them to the GM. 2 CO workers fired on the spot. Plenty more stories, but those are the top ones. I did not see the event, only the aftermath, but when the Fralines in the mall where I worked was bought out changing its sign to Macy's, a worker was electrocuted and died. At first, mall management tried to stay open, but the police forced them to close for the day. Possibly a rumor only, but I later heard that the Fralines Macy's manager had insisted that the electrician work the sign hot. When I worked at a hotel, one of the housekeepers was known to hook up with guests from time to time. The head housekeeper caught her in the act once, when she was trying to inspect rooms. I had to mediate an intra-office issue where employee A refused to interact with employee B in any sense after they had a bad date. This would not be a big deal, but it is healthcare and cooperation is necessary. Employee A is furious that employee B walked out in the middle of their date and said that he was humiliated just looking at her. Employee B basically agreed to be professional at work and admitted that she would not have walked out of the date except she was in shock. At this point, we are a little concerned that whatever shocked her might be a liability to us, drugs, a kiddie porn stash, etc. So we take them and talk to them separately. Employee A has no idea what we are talking about. Employee B wants to be discreet but eventually tells us. Apparently, the date was going well, so they decided to skip the movie and go back to employee A's place after dinner. He pulls a let me go get more comfortable while employee B waits in the living room. Employee A comes out in head-to-toe adult baby clothes, diapers included, and hands her a strap-on. In actual baby talk voice, he told her what sex acts he wants her to do to him. His kinks were never discussed beforehand. Let me tell you, taking notes on that entire situation in a way that could be disseminated to the President of Human Resources was a task. I used to work at a library and there was a homeless guy who came in every other day, and he used to drunkenly piss his pants while sitting on the upholstered chairs. It got to the point to where we were replacing the chairs since the smell sunk in, and we ended up banning him for a year. I was working second shift security in a pharma company and a line worker came put of the boss's office all disheveled. The boss had gone home already, so I kept watching and 2 dudes came out of the office a few minutes later. One was still putting his pants back on. They were extremely surprised that the door to her office was on camera. Turns out one of the dudes had stolen a master key from a janitor's cart and had been using the manager's office as a bang pad. I did not see it, but it was recorded. We have cameras. Two sets of kids 15-16 decided to have intercourse in the front row of a movie theater at the same time while the movie was running with people in the rows above them. They were wondering what we should do about the footage. I said to leave it, do not look, and it will go away in 30 days. Some states have laws about deleting evidence of a crime, so I let the system take care of it automatically. The kids were shamed by police and parents. Police were called and so were the parents. The kids acted like it was no big deal. Saw my boss and a CO worker making out. They were both married at the time. Each came into my office later that day and had to sit down with me on why these types of things happen. I was 26 years old at the time. Watched someone get burned, blow up, night shift in the winter about 4 years ago. He needed to preheat a piece of steel, so he turns on the gas, but goes away for 15-30 seconds to find his flint striker and comes back and makes the spark. Had third-degree burns on most of his body. Came back 3 months or so later with pics of all the blisters, scabs, all that nasty shit. The guy came into work very late, back office for a bank, with 2 black eyes and completely beaten up, in front of everyone, and quite loudly, said it was his girlfriend. But you think I am bad? You should see her. He was being serious too. Someone also caught him doing a line in the office toilet before he started work the day too. Work IT for a law firm. You had be astounded how many times I remote into an attorney's laptop and he just has a straight up porn folder on the desktop. When I used to work at In-N-Out Burger, the fry girl accidentally chopped off part of her finger using the potato slicer. The entire sink was filled with fries and blood, in which the tip of her finger was floating around. It was quite a spectacle. Woman pulled up behind our building. We had on-site security and lots of cameras. She stops, gets out, drops her pants, and shits behind the building. Security goes out to ask her WTF she is doing. She scoops her mess up with napkins and drives away. Our office was near a mall and an interstate highway. There were restaurants and fast food everywhere. There was no reason for her to do that behind our building. Had a fire drill at work one night. Attendance was taken and 2 people missing. Couple bosses went back and looking for them, found them in a storage room having sex. Boss told them to finish up, have a good time, go home and do not bother coming back. I worked as a janitor at a hospital. There was a private restroom on the 2nd floor. On multiple days, someone positioned themselves above the toilet and took a dump all over it. It turned out to be a janitor on 2nd shift. I worked 3rd shift. I preferred this restroom except for the days when it was covered in poop. By the way, I only talked to that janitor one time. He said he had been there for 10 years and planned to retire from there. I worked for U-Haul about 11 years ago and the location was behind a sketchy-ass club that changed ownership constantly from lawsuits and shit. I came in one Saturday to open and my manager was late, so I was alone. I get inside, start pulling the displays out to the showroom and shit, and I hear a loud-ass bang on the front door. Scared the shit out of me. I look over and there is a naked girl out there crying and begging me to let her in. I grabbed a moving blanket to cover her and called the cops. She was covered in her own shit and had dried blood all over her. Turns out, she got drugged at the club that night and got gang raped. I apologize for using the word banged instead of raped. I certainly know the poor girl was raped and did not consent and left out there passed out. When she came to, she came running to the first place she saw, which was U-Haul. I work for a medical device company. We have an on-site cadaver lab for testing. One day the lab freezer, where we keep human tissue samples, broke. The new one was not going to arrive for a few days. The lab tech wanted to move the samples to the freezer in the break room in the meantime, where we keep food. His boss caught wind of it before he actually moved them and put a stop to it. Caught 2 employees banging in a laser tag arena supply closet, with an arena full of children and the game running. I have seen poop on the ceiling. The ceiling, ass cannon, was not there. Narrowly leaving before, This 30F assistant manager at Burger King had post-close day party at BK. Most of us were high schoolers besides her and one or two others. Last three people at this party are her and two 17-18-year-old guys I knew well. She had a MMF threesome with both of them at the BK. She was also engaged. Cameras captured pretty much all of the event. I came in the next morning to the general manager explaining what had happened and that we had 3 new openings. Cinema usher, end of the night and waiting for final films to finish and clear up. One guy was sitting in the back row. We would be standing at the front to the side watching the credits. It is not uncommon for this, but the end credits finish and he is still there. I begin to walk up the stairs towards him, and he has not noticed me and I can make out he looks like he is asleep. As I get closer he suddenly looks at me and mouths something. Another head pops up from his lap. Another guy had been going to downtown with him. I instantly froze, turned around and walked back down to the exit. They rather sheepishly left a few minutes later. I thanked them for their visit and hoped they enjoyed the movie. Watched a dude do donuts on a forklift and get fired within about 30s as the super was standing there watching it go down. First day at a job and out of nowhere an employee yells across the office at the boss, "We all know you're cheating on your wife with the secretary." The boss freaked out and started yelling at all of us that his personal life is none of our business. The secretary was crying and they both left. I was supposed to be training with the boss that day, but because he was gone we all just went down the street to some Mexican restaurant and drank all day. Pretty cool gig even if it was very short-lived. I was a bartender working at a popular Fiscadelic drug-themed pizza chain in my college town. Guy sat at the bar for about 30 minutes and we talked about music and playing guitar and he just seemed like a super nice, cool guy. Then he was like, "I am gonna grab a table and eat now. Good talking to you." Left a solid tip, but what he really meant was, "I am gonna go sit in a booth and stare at that table of girls while I jerk off under the table now." And that is what he did. Luckily, the girls immediately and loudly called him out and we ran him off. We heard rumblings around town of the same thing happening at several other spots. Edit, it was indeed Mellow Mushroom. Edit 2, the amount of different people asking if this was as a particular city is alarming. Must be happening more than I thought. Edit 3, for the record, all of the guesses so far have been wrong. I worked at McCook's way back in the day talking early O's. One of the nighttime janitors was named Frankie. He was a Quebecer with a dirty sense of humor, so we got along well. One night shift, I was washing dishes in the back, while Frankie changed one of the grease traps. He slipped on the wet floor, and dropped the boiling grease all over himself. This was all directly in front of me, like some of the grease splattered on my shitty vinyl work shoes, ruining them. It was ducked. Never heard somebody scream like that in my life. Literally, hot grease all over him, head to toe. Because it was a grease burn, we had to take all of his clothes off so that it didn't melt into his skin. Pretty sure the 911 operator told us to do this, but it may have been the quick-thinking manager. Anyway, poor Frankie, covered in grease burns, cursing like a bastard, stripped down to his tidy whities, had to wait for some paramedics to arrive and treat him, and I ducked off out of there a little after midnight. He recovered, and eventually became the nighttime manager at a Walmart in McCook's. I used to see him all the time afterwards, and he seemed to have recovered well. No scars on his face, anyway. Guy at work occasionally used the machine shop on site to make pipe bombs. This was pre-9/11. Co-workers on ecstasy having intercourse on the prep table in the back at a Subway. We were open until 4 a.m. There was one occasion where a CO worker brought in speakers, black lights and strobes, and we basically had a rave. We made sandwiches with our shirts off that night for customers. Man, I have a lot of stories from that time. Edit okay, a bit more. My first night on the job there, my CO worker had dropped ecstasy. She was lost with her fingers in the lettuce, swishing them around and staring blankly at it. We made sandwiches around her. Lots of stories about sex. Once had a random customer I did never met tell my CO worker I was cute, so my CO worker sent her around the back and she jumped on me. Zero conversation, just went at it in the back corner. Sex with co-workers in the back. In the bathroom, in the refrigerator, drunk people getting subs for weed or flashing us. One of my favorites was the drunk guy who, while trying to order, thought there was a wall next to him, so he put his elbow up just like leaned over and held the pose perfectly all the way to the ground before he realized he was falling. There was a schizophrenic guy who would come in all the time and order, talking to the voices in his head all the while but totally responsive to us, polite, friendly. I shit you not, I ran into him like a year after I stopped working there, halfway across the country, sitting next to me in a park. I look over at him as he is talking to himself and my jaw just dropped. I do not know if he thought I was a hallucination or just someone weirded out by his talking to himself, but he barely glanced at me. I could not get a word out. I just sat there and looked at him for quite a while processing it, then walked away. I was closing one night and had lost the keys to my apartment. So after my shift I curled up on one of the shelves in the back, with a bag of pickle slices as a pillow, and slept for a few hours until the opener my manager came in. I woke up when the door opened and started to climb out of the shelf, just as she came around the back with all the lights still off and saw a strange form crawling out of the wall. She freaked the duck out, screamed and just fell down into a heap on the ground. I felt pretty bad about that one, but we laughed about it later. Had one of the best bosses ever through this whole time. Super chill, generous, calm, friendly. As long as we were not operating at a loss or getting her into trouble, everything was fine. She did not care how much free food we ate so long as we recorded it in the computer for inventory purposes. That job fed me through college. Back in the 90s I worked at a car wash. Across the alley from the car wash was a small condo with a balcony facing us. One day, a guy was totally banging his girlfriend from behind on the balcony facing us. They were clothed, but pants dropped, skirt hiked. We started to notice after a while, and as we pointed and showed more CO workers, their tempo increased and then they finished, and we cheered them on. Consider subscribing if you enjoyed this video and if you want to see more of Reddit Universe.